بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب العزيز بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين. قال الله تبارك وتعالى فاستبقوا الخيرات. وقال النبي صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم بادروا بالأعمال فتنا كقطع الليل المظلم يصبح الرجل مؤمنا ويمسي كافرا أو يمسي مؤمنا ويصبح كافرا يبيع دينه بعرض من الدنيا. رواه مسلم. وصدق الشاعر إذ يقول أمر على المقابر كل حين ولا أدري بأي الأرض قبري وأفرح بالغنى أن زاد مالي ولا أبكي على نقصان عمري. My dear respected brothers, elders, sisters, honorable guests and scholars, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I have to be very honest before I start speaking. If it wasn't for the same brother who was up here before me, I myself would not be speaking today. He knows I wasn't here last year, and all throughout last week and this week, I've been really under the weather. Not to demand some type of sympathy from anyone, but he knows that how under the weather I've been throughout this entire week. But because I give him my word and because I know the love that he has for me and how much effort he has put, and all the brothers I have, and all this, the different volunteers and community members and just people that I've seen once, and I see them working so hard like they're part of the family. And we all are part of one family, and that's the family of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But if it wasn't for him and if it wasn't for the effort I've seen behind this conference, I think I probably would not be standing here today. Because I know there are many scholars who spoke before me and who will speak after me, who have far more knowledge than me, who are far more eloquent than me, who have more taqwa than me, who have more piety than me. وَلَا نُزَكِّي أَحَدًا. So I try my best to stay away from the mic. But nonetheless, al-amru فوق الأدب, when someone has asked you to do something, you do it and you try to do it to the best of your ability. Today's topic, my dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, it's a topic that I hold very close to my heart. Not only because it's a Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een, not only because it's a Sahaba who was blessed with whatever he had, the lavish, the luxury, the prosperity that many of us live with today, but for many more reasons that inshallah, as I speak today, we'll find out. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, in life, in today's society, and in life in general, if anyone, we all know for a fact, if anyone, may it be a male, female, may it be a child or an adult, may it be a father or a mother or even a child, if anyone wants to achieve excellence and wants to achieve that high quality of whatever that may it be education or may it be their job, there has to be two factors, if not many more factors, that play a crucial role in order for a person to achieve success and excellence in that field he or she desires to pursue. The first and foremost is effort. Without any effort, doesn't matter if you're Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, doesn't make a difference who you are. If they didn't make an effort in their field, we wouldn't be mentioning their names today. But the topic for today is not focusing on those individuals, it's focusing on people who are far better than them. So the first thing we all need to do is make an effort. Man jadda wajada. A person who makes an effort and strives, he will gain. And it comes, in a very famous poet, بقدر الكد تكتسب المعالي من طلب العلا سهر الليالي. You know that if a person wants to attain success, he has to burn, or she has to burn the midnight oil. And we see this in every setting that we see this in settings of education and even workplaces. I'm not as old as, mashallah, many of the ammus and uncles and mothers who are sitting here today. I'm sure they experience different types of obstacles that they have to overcome in their workforce, in their workplace. But from what I've seen in my short life is that there are the two things that you need to have to attain success and excellence in any field, of course with Allah's help, is effort, and number two is sacrifice. Number two is sacrifice. And if you walk into a library of a medical school, maybe at midnight, early morning, you will find people who are junoon, who have gone crazy studying in their books. And I can attest to this, and I have friends who are sitting here from my class. We always talk about that, how hard and how much effort people make for this dunya. And we try so hard, and we make so many sacrifices that we spend days and nights not even visiting our parents. I have friends who tell me that I live in Michigan, but it's been 3 weeks since I've seen my mother's face. I live in Michigan, I live a half an hour away from my school, but it's been 3 or 4 weeks since I've seen my younger brother's face. It's been 2 or 3 weeks since I've eaten the food of my mother. And we know people make so many sacrifices, even in the educational field, even in the workforce. I know parents who tell me that because of their job, they haven't seen their families for months and months. They're always on the flight. They're always on the go. And we see many people, if you have traveled around the world, you'll see people who work, in Saudi or work in America and have families back home in either, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and they don't see their families for months and months. So the point I want to make is that in order to achieve excellence in any field, and I'll cut the chase short, we have to make an effort and make some sacrifice. And excuse me for if I have to cough, inshallah, I'll make sure I don't contaminate anyone or the mic. So the one thing that I want to talk about today is the sacrifice that was made by Mus'ab bin Umair radiyallahu anhu. When we speak of sacrifice, I don't need to stand here today and talk to any of the youngsters and tell them, oh young boy, oh my brother, make some more sacrifice and effort for your school, for your medical education, for your whatever degree, whatever you want to make or earn in your life. That is something that parents do it day in and day out. I already know that. We already know that. The topic of today is to remind us and to actually, bring us back to point 1 and point 0. When you start all over again, you sometimes have to take a step back. People who play basketball, sometimes to cross someone over, you have to take one step back. So you make some space between you and your opponent, so you know where where that opponent is. You take one step back so that you have that extra, push forward. So sometimes in life, we have to take one step back so we can actually assess where we are in terms of our deen. Mus'ab bin Umair radiyallahu anhu, my dear respected brothers and sisters, was a man who did not channel his sacrifices just for the dunya. Rather, he channeled his sacrifices for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was a man that had everything that you and I can dream of. That every child or youngster who grows up in this country always dreams of having some wealth. We're surrounded by wealth. We're surrounded by luxury. We're surrounded by privilege. We live in a country that if we don't have water, if we don't have heat, if we don't have electricity, it's very rare that we come across such circumstances where we don't have these basic necessities of life. But my dear respected brothers and elders, Mus'ab bin Umair radiyallahu anhu had far beyond that, far more than that. It comes in hadith, مَا رَأَيْتُ أَحَدًا أَحْسَنَ لِمَّةً وَلَا أَرَقَّ حُلَّةً وَلَا أَنْعَمَ نِعْمَةً مِنْ Mus'ab bin Umair radiyallahu anhu. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself said that I have not seen anyone with more with more beautiful hair. I have not seen anyone with more beautiful hair and clothing and garments and perfume like Mus'ab bin Umair radiyallahu anhu. He was a man, and it hurts me because if I were to ask any youngster sitting in the crowd today, who is Mus'ab bin Umair radiyallahu anhu, the only thing we remember is he was a beautiful, handsome young man. But that's not what made him unique. That was part of his identity growing up. But what made him unique was the fact that he had what he had and he sacrificed that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَلَيْتَكَ تَحْلُو وَالْحَيَاةُ مَرِيرًا وَلَيْتَكَ تَرْضَى وَالْأَنَامُ غِضَابُ وَلَيْتَ الَّذِي بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ عَامِرُ وَبَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ الْعَالَمِينَ خَرَابُ إِذَا صَحَّ مِنْكَ الْوُدُّ فَكُلُّ هَيٍّ وَكُلُّ الَّذِي فَوْقَ التُّرَابِ تُرَابُ. I don't have time to translate. But in short, when a person makes it the purpose of his or her life to attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is what you call success. That is what you call excellence. That is what you call achievement. And Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu understood that from a very young age. He had everything. He would walk in the streets of Medina. He would walk in the streets of Mecca before he went to Medina. And it comes in hadith that every single young female in the city of Mecca would wait outside to see him. He would walk in the streets of Mecca and he would walk by and you could tell by the scent that he left behind that Mus'ab had passed this path. He was a man who had the best of perfume, the best of clothes, the best of shoes. He would have shoes that would come straight from Yemen, custom-made shoes, not Jordans that you buy at Foot Locker or Champs. He would have shoes that he would custom make for himself. He was a man that lived a luxurious life. But when he heard that there was a man, and Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu, although he was very young, because his mother was a very, very strong woman in Quraysh, he had the privilege of attending the meetings of Quraysh. So one day he was sitting in the meeting in Quraysh, and they all were talking about this new man by the name of Muhammad, who was coming with this message of believing in one Allah and believing in him as a prophet. And they were plotting on how to kill him or how to, slow his message down. And Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu was a very smart, intellectual person. And he heard this, and he decided one day that why not just check out what he's saying? Why not figure out what these guys are talking about, some sort, things that don't make sense. That how can a man become so mad who was just a Sadiq al-Amin 2 days ago, and now you're calling him mad? It makes no sense. Let me go and find out for myself. Nevertheless, he goes, and today's talk, I really don't have time to talk about his seerah, his life from beginning till end, because if I do that, the talk, A, will be very dry, and 2, we'll miss the main points of the talk. So what inshallah I'll try to do is to give a synopsis of his life and try to take some key points from his life. So nevertheless, this is how he became Muslim. He ends up going to Dar al-Arqam ibn Abi al-Alqam, and he knocks on the door, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam opens the door, and the Sahaba see Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu, and they were very excited to see him, because they knew of his status in the community and how important it was for Muslims, even if he became Muslim. So nevertheless, he sits down and he asks Rasulullah, please teach me. What have you brought? What has Allah sent you with? Who is this Allah you're talking about? And then Rasulullah gives him da'wah. And at that moment, Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu, who just a few moments ago was a mushrik, was a person who was on the religion of his forefathers, idol worshipper. Just after hearing the message of Rasulullah on that spot, at that very moment, without hesitation, he said, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And the point I want to make here today, my youngsters who are sitting here, and young men and women who are sitting here today, and adults alike, is that when we see something is good for us, and when we know, and when Allah shows us signs, and we all have signs in our lives, which Allah shows to us, through which Allah shows us that this is the right thing you should be doing. When we see certain signs, and when something good is brought in front of our eyes, when a shaykh gives you advice, or when your friends bring you to the masjid, or when you go for umrah, or when you go for hajj, or whatever it may be, and when you see something good happening in front of your eyes, don't delay. Do not delay, because if Mus'ab radiallahu anhu was a man like how many of us are today, and if he said to himself, you know what, I'm a handsome young man, let me go and ask my friends, let me go consult with my mother and father, let me go think about it for a moment. That idea of thinking about it, sometimes we put our logic above Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We put our rationale, our ability to think above Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Na'udhu billah min dhalik. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Mus'ab radiallahu anhu took this opportunity and he jumped on this opportunity. And it comes in the Quran, it's an ayah in the Quran that really reminds us of this idea of taking something good and jumping on it right away. Not literally, but metaphorically speaking, taking the opportunity and grasping it right away and not delaying yourself in the opportunity. It comes in the Quran. It's a very scary ayah in Surah Hadid. Allah mentions in the 13th ayah of the surah, Allah mentions how On the day of judgment, the munafiqeen will be brought and the Muslimin will be brought, the mu'mineen. And Allah speaks of how Allah will give the believers Jannah and how He will give the munafiqeen Jahannam. And the ayah that comes after this ruku, Allah speaks about يُنَادُونَهُمْ أَلَمْ نَكُمْ مَعَكُمْ. The munafiqeen, after they will be put to one side, and when the Muslims will be put to one side, the munafiqeen will call towards the Muslims and they will say, يُنَادُونَهُمْ أَلَمْ نَكُمْ مَعَكُمْ. They will say, were we not with you? Did we not go to the same places together? Did we not listen to the same lectures together? Did we not go to the same conferences together? Did we not play the same sports together? Did we not eat the same food together? أَلَمْ نَكُمْ مَعَكُمْ. Were we not together? Were we not homies? Were we not brothers and sisters together? قَالُوا بَلَى. And the answer the Muslims will say, certainly you were with us. وَلَكِنَّكُمْ. You came to the conference with us. You came to the event with us. You came to the masjid with us. وَلَكِنَّكُمْ فَتَنْتُمْ أَنفُسَكُمْ. But you deceived yourself. You indulged in haram after coming to the conference. وَتَرَبَّصْتُمْ. And this is the point I want to make. The second word Allah uses in the Quran. وَتَرَبَّصْتُمْ. And you delayed. You came with us. You were part of this conference, but you delayed. You were that person that would always delay and think to yourself, I'm going to think about this for a moment. I'm not ready to change my life. I'm going to wait till I go for Umrah and Hajj. I'm going to wait till I become older. وَلَا تُرْجِي فِعْلَ الْخَيْرِ إِلَىٰ غَدْ لَعَلَّ غَدًا يَأْتِي وَأَنْتَ مُمِيتٌ. How a poet says, do not delay something till tomorrow, because tomorrow can come and we will be 6 feet beneath the ground. يَا مَنْ بِدُنْيَاهُ اشْتَغَلَ وَغَرَّهُ طُولُ الْأَمَلِ الْمَوْتُ يَأْتِي بَغْتَةً وَالْقَبْرُ صُنْدُوقُ الْعَمَلِ. A poet says again, Imam Ali radiallahu anhu says, oh, that person who is so engrossed in this dunya and forgets about the akhirah, let that person be reminded that death comes without a call. So you were with us, but you would always tell us, I'm going to think about this for a moment. وَغَرَّتْكُمُ الْأَمَانِ وَتَرَبَّصْتُمْ وَغَرَّتْكُمُ الْأَمَانِي. And after you would delay, you would have false hopes. You would hope that, today I'm going to sin. I'm going to continue engaging in haram. I'm going to continue listening to haram, talking, speaking haram, looking at haram, thinking of haram. Although thinking is not, we're not held accountable for what we think, but the idea of letting our minds think of haram in itself is haram. It's very deep to understand. Thinking of haram, we're not held accountable for it. But the idea to make it halal upon our bodies, to allow us to think of haram, is in itself, it's haram. Because that type of ideology will for sure take a person toward haram. When a person, accidentally thinks of haram, that's where Allah and His Prophet have told us that's forgiven. But nevertheless, وَغَرَّتْكُمُ الْأَمَانِي. You were deceived by this life. حَتَّى جَاءَ أَمْرُ اللَّهِ. And then death came and it was too late. You were on one side and now today we are on one side. So my dear respected brothers and sisters, from this one moment of Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu's life, the thing that I want all of us to take away today, and I think I'm almost out of time. That's why I don't like talking, because mashallah, when I do start talking, it's hard for me to stop talking, like my brothers also. So Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu, the one thing I want all of us to take away is that when we are faced with something that's positive for us, something that we know is khair for us, we have to take the opportunity and use the opportunity to do more and more good. After today's session at Miftah conference, I'm sure all of us will hear many good stories of Sahabas. We will hear stories of their sacrifices. We will hear stories about what they did for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one thing I want all of us to go back and leave this conference with is that we, inshallah, before we walk out of these doors, we make an intention to change our lives for the good. And the one thing that I know I'm out of time, the only thing that inshallah I wish to add before I finish this talk is this idea of how in our lives today, sometimes, and it's tough for me to say this because I see this happening even with us, living in this country, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you with so much, or when Allah continues to give you more and more, sometimes you think you're doing something right. And this is something that I want all of us to think about for a second. In life, when Allah gives us wealth, or when Allah continues to bless us with more and more prosperity, that's not always a sign that we're on the right path. That's not always a sign that Allah is pleased with us. And the reason why I'm saying that is Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu, if the condition for us being accepted in the eyes of Allah was prosperity, then Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu would have been the biggest failure ever in history of mankind, na'udhu billah. But through his life, we can see, through the lens of the Sahaba and through the lens of Iman, we can see that Mus'ab radiallahu anh was a man, before Islam, he had everything that he wanted. But after accepting Islam, and we know this story, when he passed away, he was a man in the battle of Uhud. When Mus'ab radiallahu anh, I will share this story and I will conclude. In the battle of Uhud, when Mus'ab radiallahu anh, and I will fast forward till there, Mus'ab radiallahu anh was the man who was the means of Islam coming into Medina. Abdul, I have some time? 5 minutes more? Mufti Abdul Wahab, excuse me, I'm sorry. Ever since he became Mufti, if I ever say Abdul Wahab, he always gives me a look. Mufti Abdul Wahab. Sometimes becoming a Mufti is in itself a big test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm just, Ya Allah. I'm not joking, I'm serious. Anyways, mashallah, don't worry, he has three older brothers that inshallah we try our best to keep him in place, although it's very difficult. Nevertheless, the one thing that I want to mention before I finish up today, and I will conclude with this, Mus'ab radiallahu anh, and I will conclude with this, Mus'ab radiallahu anh, if many of us don't know, and I will say this, and I will say one more thing, and I will conclude inshallah, I promise. Mus'ab radiallahu anh was the reason why Rasulullah and the Sahabas went to Medina. And I didn't have time to touch on this because, I digress and I spoke too much about how he accepted Islam. But Mus'ab radiallahu anh was a man through his sacrifice of his hijrah to Medina. He went to Abyssinia first, and then he went to Medina. After the first Bay'at al-Aqaba, Rasulullah sent him to Medina. And he was a man that went to Medina when there were only 12 Muslims in Medina, 12 more or less according to some muhaddithin. He went to Medina, and because of his effort and his da'wah and his ilm and his knowledge, the majority of Medina, Aus and Khazraj, Sa'ad bin Mu'ad, Sa'ad bin Ubadah radiallahu anhuma, both accepted Islam. And because of his sacrifice and of his da'wah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was able to do hijrah. And the one thing that my teachers always taught me growing up, and what I've read in books, is that all of the reward for a person who goes to Medina, all of the reward of all those Sahabas who went to Medina and practiced Islam in Medina and prayed in Medina, and the reward of all of us who ever go to Medina, inshallah, one day, may Allah take us there over and over again. The reward of all of the people who ever will go to Medina will be given to Mus'ab radiallahu anh, because he was the ambassador of Rasulullah who was sent to Medina. Rasulullah did not send Abu Bakr, he did not send Umar, even though they were both Muslims at this time. He sent Mus'ab bin Umair radiallahu anhu because he understood that Mus'ab was a man who made sacrifice. And with great sacrifices comes great reward. Just like how a person wants to become a physician, he will not mind suffering day and night and having maybe a chocolate bar to eat at night because he sees the end. She sees the end. They know that after these 4 years, I'll be living a decent life. Mus'ab radiallahu anhu made sacrifices, and Rasulullah saw that because of his sacrifice, Allah will bring iman and Allah will bring hidayah in Medina. So one thing we all should remember, that Mus'ab radiallahu anhu, this youngster, and I say this to the youngsters, never undermine your potential. Never undermine your potential. Going to university or going to college or even being at high school, never think once in your life, never think for even a second in your life that I am useless in society, that I don't matter in society. Let these elder people in the community, let these shuyukh, let these other ammus take care of the matters of this deen. Remember, Mus'ab radiallahu anhu was a youngster like you and I. And if you look at history of Sahabas, the people who carried Islam's legacy forward were mainly the youngsters. With the help and the wisdom of the elders, Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu, Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu, Abdullah bin Amr radiallahu anhu, Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, Mus'ab radiallahu anhu, the list goes on and on. These were all youngsters. These were all youngsters who understood their value and they took their potential. And today, in today's society, youngsters have lost their potential. And I will say one thing, one of the main reasons youngsters have lost their potential is because of this complex that they have that I am useless in society. That because I don't pray 5 times a day, I don't have good qualities. Because I don't pray 5 times a day, I can't do certain good things for my religion. Remember, الناس معادن كمعادن الذهب والفضة. We are all mines of silver and gold. Allah has, if we look in this room today and we look at the man or the sister who's sitting next to us, wallahi, the person who is sitting next to you has talents and has qualities that you don't possess. Every single person sitting here today is unique. And we all have to understand this uniqueness and this entire unity that we have amongst each other is what makes our religion so pure. And the Sahaba radiallahu anhum understood this. Mus'ab radiallahu anhu understood this. And he was a man who lived a life of sacrifice and he died in a way of sacrifice. We know this famous hadith. It comes in Bukhari that Mus'ab radiallahu anhu, when he passed away, there was not enough cloth to cover his body. In غطينا رأسه وبدت رجليه, that when we were to cover his head, his feet were to show. And when we would cover his feet, his head was to show. And Rasulullah said that cover his head with a cloth and cover his feet with idkhar, with grass. My dear respected brothers and elders, a man who had the lavish life, a man who had the luxury of this dunya, a man who had anything and everything a person can dream of. He gave all of that up for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one is asking you and I today to give up our cars, to give up our wealth, to give up our children, to give up our houses. All that is being asked from us today is to give up our haram desires for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All that is being asked from us today is to give up those things that displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do things that will please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, whenever we do something haram, we are earning the displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're making ourselves go one step further from Jannah and one step closer to Jahannam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us those people, فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ, who run towards good, who run towards Jannah, who run away from Jahannam. May Allah make us such people who not only strive for excellence for the things of this world, we all should strive for excellence for our education. We all should strive for excellence to be the best at our workplace. We should all strive for excellence to be the best husband, to be the best wife. But the one thing that we cannot forget while we are living this life is that we have to strive and make sacrifices to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah azza wa jalla to give us the same zeal to sacrifice and to make an effort to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like how Mus'ab radiallahu anhu was able to sacrifice and make an effort to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah to make us such people who will use whatever we learn today and not delay in changing our lives for the good. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.